Hi, this is Duke Ralston from the Reaper's Digest. I want to thank you for listening to the show, and I wanted to ask you to buy the Reaper's Digest a cup of coffee. Just go to Ko-fi.com/tennessemacabre and send us a tip. Thank you again.
Welcome to a night.
Hello, and welcome to Reaper's Digest with Blake and Duke. This is the podcast.
What?
I said this is the podcast where we take our prodigious knowledge of science fiction, horror, fantasy, and other genre literatures and actually put it to some sort of use.
Yes, indeed. With one of my favorite stories today, or actually favorite movies today. So,
yeah, I think we're going to talk about the novel today, and then in the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the movie.
yes, indeed.
We're talking Salem's Lot by Stephen King.
Yes.
So,
And a lot to cover in this podcast. This is going to be our first two-parter.
our first two-parter. And the first time is always the sweetest.
That's right.
Well, I'm Blake Ray. I am the lead singer, or one of the lead singers of the band Blood Oaks, and the co-founder of Pulp Factory EZ.
I am Duke Ralston. I'm with, I have a TV show called Tennessee Macabre with some friends of mine. We host B horror movies, and we're available on Other Worlds TV, ITV Chattanooga, and ECN TV, available on streams on the internet.
You definitely need to check it out if you haven't yet.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
Working on a radio station, internet radio station as well. There were like 5 minutes in the day that I didn't have anything to do, so I had to do something to fill it.
Well, yeah, you can't have any downtime. That's when the thinking starts. So, all right, what are you doing? What are you drinking today, dude?
I'm glad you asked me that. This is Common John Brewing Company, located in Manchester, Tennessee. I met these guys. I am drinking, before I go there, I'm drinking Heathen Child, which is it is a Pilsner. It's a Vienna lager. I met these guys about 2 years ago. South Pittsburgh had its first brew fest 2 years ago. And they came over, and at the time, they were just a brewing club. And they have turned it into a microbrewery in Manchester. And they brew the best beer I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Yeah. I went over and visited them about 2 or 3 weeks ago and had a flight of all their beers. And, you go into a lot of microbreweries and the beer's good or great, and then the food isn't all that good. The food here is excellent, which was shocking. I mean, it's hot dogs and it's onion rings and it's pizzas, but it's all very good, done very well. And the beer is just phenomenal. And this is my favorite. I had about 2 4-packs, 8 pints. And I was going to save this to last, but it's my favorite and it didn't make it.
There you
so we just
go.
live with that. What are you drinking?
I am drinking Sweetwater Hazy IPA.
Yes. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Sweetwater's from, Atlanta, which is where I live, or just outside.
Mm-hmm.
Founded in 97. One thing I really love about Sweetwater, other than the beer, I love the beer. They tend to be very heavy on the hazy, double-hopped IPAs.
Yes, they do.
Juicy.
Ooh.
It's good, though. Wow, it's good.
Have you ever tried their blueberry? They make a summer, I think it's a lager. It's a blueberry lager.
I've had it.
Yeah, I love the stuff. It's like evil lemonade.
Yeah. It'll light you up, too.
Yes, it will.
Now, they partner with the Chattahoochee River Keepers.
Oh, I did not realize
And,
that.
Yeah, they part of their proceeds go to helping keep the Chattahoochee River clean.
Okay.
They also throw one hell of a concert every year in Atlanta, 420 Fest.
Yep, I know they do that. One of the co-founders has a house up on the mountain behind me, and so I see him every once. He doesn't live here all the time, but it's sort of like a vacation house, I guess. And so I know him. I see him every once in a while, and I've talked to him a lot about that concert series. It's a really cool concert series.
Yeah, I saw Primus there a few years back, and I might have been imbibing substances other than beer, but
maybe
it was a great show. I giggled a lot. Now, I'm a big man to be giggling, but
yes, me too. But I've been there.
So, all right, we're talking Salem's Lot, which we've said a great novel.
Yes, right. Fantastic novel.
It was published in 1975, nominated for the World Fantasy Award in 1976, and the Locus Award for the all-time best fantasy novel in 1987.
Okay.
King has said in multiple interviews that this is his favorite of his own books.
I've got to agree with the man. This is my favorite of his books.
I'm a little partial to the first one I ever read because it was the first one. You know, Firestarter, which is a great book.
Oh, yeah, that is a good book. Yeah.
Yeah. And turned into a pretty successful movie.
Yeah.
But going back and reading this has so much to say.
Yes. There's a lot of depth in here.
Yeah. Which you don't always get in horror. I think that's what separates King from some of his imitators, is he's got something to say.
Yes.
You can absolutely teach someone to write, but you can't teach them to have a message.
No, and this book there's a lot of embedded messages. And one of the things, and I thought about this last night, and I laid down and gone to sleep, or laid down to go to sleep. And of course I'm thinking about Salem's Lot and Stephen King. And I got to thinking, my question is, are the vampires evil coming to this town and preying upon the innocent? Or are the vampires filling an ecological niche and taking out damaged goods?
Well, one of the repeated images you get is the fire.
Yes. Purification.
Yeah, purification. And that good fires prevent bad fires.
Yes.
So we'll have to get into that a little bit more in just a minute.
Yeah.
And you want to go through a quick biography of King?
Yeah, let's do that, because there was a lot of stuff. I don't know a lot about King, and you research it. You got a lot of great stuff in here, so let's hear it.
Yeah. So he was born September 21st, 1947 in Portland, Maine. Graduated University of Maine, and later worked as a teacher while establishing himself as a writer. This is really important. King was a writing teacher when he started publishing.
Right.
And he was writing under a pseudonym when he wrote horror. Because he didn't think that the university system would look favorably on a horror writer.
I can understand that.
Especially in the 70s.
Yeah.
He published under a few names. Richard Bachman was one he used later. He is one of the most successful living authors, period.
Yes.
I
would almost, J.K. Rowling might be more successful, but I would argue that Stephen King has been more successful for longer with very many more novels to his credit than J.K. Rowling has.
J.K. Rowling tapped into a market that hadn't been tapped into before, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not never before, but not in a long time.
Not to the degree that she tapped it.
Yeah. She got that young adults, and she knew how to grow with them. And then, later she becomes kind of a jerk, honestly.
Yeah. She was a one-trick pony.
Yeah, she really was.
Yeah.
Because have you read any of her other stuff?
No. Yeah, it doesn't. There's nothing that entices me to read it. And I mean, I loved Harry Potter. I loved that series, but I haven't seen anything else that comes from J.K. Rowling that even is remotely interesting.
Yeah. So King, his parents split up when he was young, and him and his brother sort of lived in Indiana and Connecticut for several years. He moved back to Maine with his mother and his brother, where he graduated high school in 1966. Keep that in mind. 1966 is important because King's villains tend to be high school bullies,
yes,
from a certain era,
Yes.
So he went to the University of Maine, wrote for the school newspaper, was in the school government. He published his first short story, and then he graduated with a degree in English in 1970. He took a job in a laundry, continued to write. He was an English teacher at Hampton Academy, and that was the year he married another writer, Tabitha Spruce, who was successful in her own right. In 1973, he sells his first novel, Carrie.
Yep.
So, 1975 is Salem's Lot. 1977, The Shining. 1980, Firestarter. Cujo. It. And 1986, I mean, talking hit.
After hit, after hit, after hit. Yes. Iconic hits.
Yeah. And then when people said that that these books were only getting published, they were only popular because of his name, he started publishing books as Richard Bachman without telling anybody.
Right.
Famously, he wrote The Running Man, which was adapted into a pretty fun Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Oh, yeah.
So he's had tons and tons of his works adapted. Of course,
lots of his short stories have been adapted.
Most of his work has been adapted.
Yeah.
You've got. What's your favorite movie adaptation of King, other than Salem's Lot? We're going to bar that one out.
Salem's Lot. Okay. I like Christine. I think I'd have to say The Shining, although I like it too. So it's hard to say, but I would have to say The Shining would be where I'd come down on that.
The Kubrick Shining?
Yes.
They made. Did you ever see the TV miniseries?
I did, and the TV one followed the book much better than the Kubrick one.
Oh yeah,
but you can't top Jack Nicholson.
No,
you can't. And, I mean that, and even though the movie departs significantly from the novel, that movie still, I mean, that the music, I can see that Volkswagen driving up through the mountain pass, and it sends chill bumps up and down my spine right now. Yeah.
My first band was a horror punk band, and we used to use that sound clip. It's okay. We saw it on the TV.
Yep.
Yeah. We used to use that to introduce ourselves live.
Absolutely.
So
it's one of those pieces of music that everybody knows.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, without putting too fine a point on it, King had Oh, by the way, my favorite King movie
Mm-hmm.
is Pet Cemetery.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
The original one.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Wow, so good.
Yeah.
But or Silver Bullet. That's a good one too.
You know, I didn't even think about that. I do like Silver Bullet, and I think it's a very the werewolf story. There's a lot of people that tell it, and it always ends up being the same. But the Silver Bullet is different, and I like that. It's a different twist on a very traditional monster story, as is Salem's Lot.
Yeah. I think
but
that's what he does so well.
Yeah.
That pulls people in is he takes your childhood fears and he makes them new again.
Yes.
You know? So Silver Bullet's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's based on the King short story Cycle of the Werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
I have a particular love-hate relationship with werewolf movies myself.
Okay. Tell us about that.
I think werewolves are about the coolest monster ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think werewolf movies are often terrible.
Yes.
Because I think they miss the point.
Yeah.
It's not about how vicious the wolf is. It's how vicious the people are.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite...
you wrote a pretty good werewolf short story that I read.
Yeah. You know, it was published in the Marion County Messenger,
yes.
where all the greats are published.
Yes.
But yeah, the corn wolf, which is a reference to the idea of the predatory dog being loose in the cornfield.
Yes.
To scare children out of getting lost. So, without putting too fine a point on it, King in the mid 80s had a little bit of a drug and alcohol problem.
Mm-hmm.
Some personal problems.
Mm-hmm.
He does not remember directing the movie Maximum Overdrive.
Probably best.
Probably best. Probably for the best, yeah. Because you know that originally got an X rating for violence?
It did.
Mm-hmm.
I rag on it. I remember watching it not long after it was out on VHS. It wasn't long after it came out. Yeah. And I just don't really remember much about it. It was just kind of, there wasn't much there.
Yeah. Go back and watch it.
Yeah.
And remember that my man had a head full of toot when he was directing it. You give him a little bit of leeway, and he's having a lot of fun. You can tell.
Okay, I can go there.
Yeah. So, but we're talking about Salem's Lot because it is one of his favorites. Because we're doing a cataloging, and Duke, I don't know if we've ever really explicitly said this, but we're doing a cataloging of the horror genre.
Yes.
And of genre literature. We're going to get on to some sci-fi soon. But
those lines between horror and sci-fi, they blur. Very much. And it's hard to be strictly horror without getting into some sci-fi and some fantasy. And something that I have noticed, something that we kind of built Tennessee Macabre around, Neil Privet and I. Neil is my partner in that. And we wanted to build it around rock and roll. So it's hard to catalog horror without discussing rock and roll. And I think we'll probably do some of that too.
I think we'll have to.
Yeah.
Speaking of Maximum Overdrive, it's got a killer soundtrack by AC/DC.
It does. Yeah.
I'm not even a big AC/DC fan, but that's a killer soundtrack.
That's a killer soundtrack. It is.
Yeah. So, and King, famously a big rock and roll fan. So,
one of the things that I like most about Christine is every chapter begins with a verse from a rock and roll great song.
Mm-hmm. Big Ramones fan, King. You know that?
Yeah.
Something him and I have in common.
Yeah.
Cool. Bar none, coolest band that's ever lived.
Yes, indeed. The Ramones.
Yeah. So, maybe they weren't smart enough to be posing, but you know, they take their lumps, but they keep going. You know.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So, let's get on to the story. I'll give you a quick summary here.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawns on me we should probably at some point start doing what do you call it? Spoiler alerts, right?
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
But I would hope that everybody that's tuning into this podcast has watched or read, preferably read, Salem's Lot.
Absolutely. But we're gonna just in case you haven't, we're gonna say spoiler alert.
Yes, indeed.
Alert. There you go. So, if you haven't, pause this, go read these 700 pages, and come back.
Come back and talk to us. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got Ben Mears, who's a writer, moderately successful. He's making a living off it. This is the first time King uses a writer as his main character.
Right.
Which is going to be a major staple of his. He begins to write about the writer and write about creatives, musicians, things like that. I think to great effect. He understands this world. So you've got Ben Mears. He's a writer, and he's traveling to Jerusalem's Lot, Maine.
Yes.
25 years after he lived there as a kid for a little while. Mm-hmm. He's trying to write his next novel. He becomes friends with a high school teacher, Matt Burt, strikes up a romantic relationship with Susan Norton, a young college graduate. She's also an artist. She's a painter. Ben is trying to write a book about the Marston house, where he had a bad experience as a child. He saw this guy hanging himself, a ghost, right? The Marston house is this empty, dilapidated house owned by a mobster from the 30s who killed his wife and hung himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he is going to rent the house. Only when he gets to town, it's already been rented. Right. Or bought, actually. So, it's Straker and Barlow are the two guys who have bought this house.
Mm-hmm.
Their arrival coincides with the disappearance of a young boy and the death of his older brother. And turns out it's Barlow. Barlow is a vampire, right? In the Count Dracula old world, old world aristocracy vein, right?
Straker is his human ghoul. He's
familiar.
Yeah, he's familiar.
So you've got this kid, Mark Petrie, mm-hmm. who Danny tries to get to turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's able to fend him off with a plastic cross.
Yes.
Mark is obsessed with Hollywood monsters and knows you're not supposed to invite vampires into your home, which helps him stay safe.
It's worth mentioning, I think, that Mark is also an aspiring writer.
Yes, absolutely. Wants to be a horror writer one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Mark is a great character.
Yeah, I like the kid already. Yeah.
That scene where Danny comes to the window
Mm-hmm.
and tries to, well, glamour his way in, hypnotize Mark is terrifying.
Yes, it
Got
is.
little boy vampire scratching at the window. Terrifying.
That works quicker than X-Lax. Yeah, it's a scary. It's one of the scariest moments in film history, and of course in book history.
Oh yeah. I would put it up against anything in the original Dracula.
Oh Lord, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and don't get me wrong, I love Dracula. I have 3 copies of that book, 3 different translations, but
it's not.
It's
Dracula is a lot of things, but it's not particularly scary.
It's not in your face like this.
No.
You have to know so much culture and backstory,
Yes.
So, several days later, many of the townspeople are turned. Matt Burt sees someone turn, or rather hears it. Matt, Ben, Susan, they're joined by Jimmy Cody, who is Matt's doctor, along with Mark and the local priest, Father Callahan. Put a pin in him. We're going to spend, 5-6 hours talking about him.
Yes, indeed.
Then we get into some really crazy stuff. Susan gets captured by Barlow. Her and Mark are both creeping up to the house, the Marston house, to confront him. Mm-hmm. She's captured and taken down and fed to Barlow, who turns her into a vampire.
Yes.
Mark escapes.
Yes.
Father Callahan and Mark head over to Mark's parents' house to explain the danger the family is in, because when the intrepid vampire hunters go back, they are mocked via letter, and Mark's family is threatened directly. Mark's parents don't believe him until Barlow shows up. He slams Mark's parents' heads together, killing them, takes the boy hostage. Callahan has a crisis of faith. Callahan doesn't do so well.
Right.
Barlow makes him drink his blood. And then Callahan cannot re-enter his church. He's unclean. He leaves the lot.
Yes.
Jimmy dies falling into a good old-fashioned booby trap. It's a staircase turned into a punji pit.
Mm-hmm.
Ben and Mark eventually kill Barlow, but they don't kill all the vampires.
No.
They leave, and then the novel's prologue and epilogue are about them in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Hiding out. Right?
Right.
So the epilogue has them return to the town and burn it down.
Purification by fire.
Purification by fire. So, and I'm taking a lot of liberties. This is my copy that I got from my local library.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the name, but they fired a good friend of mine, so I'm not going to give them a prop. 653 pages.
Yes.
In 10-point font. I mean, it is a long one.
Yes, it is.
I did not, however, ever feel like it dragged.
At no point does this book drag. It moves from the time you pick it up till the time you lay it down. Even the epilogue and the prologue move, because the fact that it has an epilogue and a prologue tells you an awful lot about this story, because the good guys don't win. They are surviving. It is almost post-apocalyptic in that, somebody has dropped the vampire bomb on Salem's Lot, and these two guys just survive. Yeah. So even the epilogue and the prologue move, I think. An important point that I feel like, you got to bring out is that they have to get out of town. And I guess it's what I'm trying to say is you've got logarithmic. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. This thing spreads like a plague. Okay. Rather than just what you see in the traditional 1930s horror movie where Dracula has 3 brides. This thing moves through the town like the Black Death, and it blows up overnight, and Salem's Lot is infested with vampires. It's also, there's a lot about setting here. I'm from a small town, okay? I know Mark. I was Mark, okay? I know Crockett. I know a teacher, several teachers. So these are character types that I know and am familiar with. And that goes back to the whole in your face thing. This isn't a castle in Transylvania. This is not London. This is small town America.
Well, something interesting to think about.
Uh-huh.
What does it mean to take it from Transylvania to a hometown? Because that's a big part of Dracula, is the other invading, right?
Yes, right.
In that case, it's east coming to west. In this case, it is outside coming to inside. Small towns are very insular.
Yes.
They exist the way they do because they're so insular. Now, do you think that the othering here has to do with the city-dwelling nature of Barlow and Stryker?
I think to some degree, yes. I think it also has to deal with the city-dwelling nature of Hugh B. Marsden, because Hugh B. Marsden is for someone that doesn't have a single line in a 600, almost 700-page novel, Hugh B. Marsden is a huge character in this novel.
Oh, yeah.
And he is from Boston and goes into hiding in Salem's Lot. Then, of course, you've got Ben Mears is an outsider. He was born in the town and spent some time there, but he moved away and he's come back. So he's treated as an outsider. And then I think you have to count Mark as an outsider, even though he's born and grown up there. His interests are horror models, fantasy in a town that's very bread and potatoes. He doesn't fit in. So
something called a self-made freak.
Yes.
In sideshows, there were often the tattooed man, the tattooed woman, right? Mm-hmm. They would be tattooed head to foot, face, hands, everything, right?
Right.
They were part of the freak show, which is not the preferred nomenclature now, but they were quote unquote self-made freaks.
Right.
Right. So Mark is a self-made outsider.
Yes.
He's not an outsider because he comes from elsewhere. He's an outsider because his interests are different. He is weird, a little bit off. They describe him as being fleet of foot, kind of stoic, which kids often are not,
Right. Ironically, one of the early on in the book, Mark